Hi, this is Monica Sub, and through the year 2008 to 2009, we're going to be going over so many chapters in AP Bio. But first of all, we'll start off with Chapter 4, Carbon and the Molecular Diversity of Life. So before we go over the key concepts in Chapter 4, we're going to be looking over an overview of carbon, the backbone of life. Although water is the universal medium for life on Earth, living organisms such as the plants and trilobite beetle are made up of chemicals that are based mostly on the element carbon. Carbon enters the biosphere through the action of plants, which uses solar energy to transform atmospheric CO2 into the molecules of life. These molecules are passed along to animals that feed on plants. Of all chemical elements, carbon is unparalleled in its ability to form molecules that are large, complex, and diverse. And this molecular diversity has made possible the diversity of organisms that have evolved on Earth. Proteins, DNA, carbohydrates, and other molecules that distinguish living matter from inanimate material are all composed of carbon atoms bonded to one another into the atom of other elements. Hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus are other common ingredients for these compounds. But it is the element carbon that accounts for the large diversity of biological molecules. Proteins and other very large molecules are the main focus of Chapter 5. Here we investigate the properties of smaller molecules. We will use these molecules to illustrate concepts of molecular architecture that will help explain why carbon is so important to life, at the same time highlighting the theme that emergent properties arise from the organization of matter in living organisms. Now we will begin Chapter 4. Concept 4-1. Organic chemistry is the study of carbon compounds. For historical reasons, compounds containing carbon are said to be organic, and the branch of chemistry that specializes in the study of carbon compounds is called organic chemistry. Organic compounds range from simple molecules such as methane to colossal ones such as proteins, with thousands of atoms. Most organic compounds contain hydrogen atoms in addition to carbon atoms. The overall percentages of the major elements of life, C carbon, H hydrogen, O oxygen, N nitrogen, S sulfur, and lastly P phosphorus, are quite uniform from one organism to another. Because of carbon's versatility, however, this limited assortment of atomic building blocks taken in roughly the same proportions can be used to build an inexhaustible variety of organic molecules. Different species of organisms and different individuals within a species are distinguished by variations in their organic molecules. Since the dawn of human history, people have used other organisms as sources of valued substances, from food and medicines to fabrics. The science of organic chemistry originated in attempts to purify and improve the yield of such products. But by the early 1800s, chemists had learned to make many simple compounds in the laboratory by combining elements under the right conditions. Artificial synthesis of the complex molecules extracted from living matter seemed impossible, however. At that time, the Swedish chemist Jöns Jacob Berzelius made the distinctions between organic compounds, those thought to arise only in living organisms, and inorganic compounds, those found only in the non-living world. Vitalism, the belief in a life force outside the jurisdiction of physical and chemical laws, provided the foundation for the new discipline of organic chemistry. Chemists began to chip away at the foundation of vitalism when they finally learned to synthesize organic compounds in laboratories. In 1828, Friedrich Wöhler, a German chemist who studied with Berzelius, attempted to make an inorganic salt, ammonium cyanate, by mixing solutions of ammonium ions and cyanate ions. Wöhler was astonished to find that instead he had made urea, an organic compound present in the urine of animals. Wöhler challenged the vitalist when he wrote, "I must tell you that I can prepare urea without requiring a kidney or an animal, either man or dog." However, one of the ingredients used in the synthesis, the cyanate, had been extracted from animal blood, and the vitalists were not swayed by Wöhler's discovery. A few years later, however, Hermann Kolb, a student of Wöhler's, made the organic compound acetic acid from inorganic substances that could be prepared directly from pure elements. Vitalism crumbled completely after several decades of laboratory synthesis of some increasingly complex organic compounds. In 1953, Stanley Miller, graduate student of Harold Urey at the University of Chicago, helped bring this abiotic non-living synthesis of organic compounds into the context of evolution in a class experiment described and is known as Miller's experiment. Miller's experiment was testing whether complex organic molecules could arise spontaneously under conditions thought to have existed on the early Earth, stimulated interest in further research on the origin of organic compounds. Some scientists have questioned whether the gases Miller used as starting materials were really present in the primitive Earth's atmosphere. Recent work supports a slightly different recipe for early Earth's compounds. When used in the experiment, it led to the compounds Miller found. Although the jury is still out, these experiments support the idea that abiotic synthesis of organic compounds could have been an early stage in the origin of life. The pioneers of organic chemistry helped shift the mainstream of biological thought from vitalism to mechanism, the view that physical and chemical laws govern all natural phenomena, including the processes of life. Organic chemistry was redefined as the study of carbon compounds, regardless of origin. Organisms produce most of the naturally occurring organic compounds, and these molecules represent diversity and range of complexity unrivaled by inorganic compounds. However, the rules of chemistry apply to all molecules. The foundation of organic chemistry is not some intangible life force, but the unique chemical versatility of the element carbon. So now we will look back to figure 4.2 inquiry, and the question is, can organic molecules form under conditions believed to stimulate those on the early Earth? So the experiment, known as Miller's experiment, was in 1953, Stanley Miller set up a closed system to stimulate conditions thought to have existed on the early Earth. A flask of water stimulated the primeval sea. The water was heated so that some vaporized and moved into a second, higher flask containing the atmosphere, a mixture of gases. Sparks were discharged into the synthetic atmosphere to mimic lightning. To further explain this experiment, there are mainly 5 steps. Number 1. The water mixture in the sea flask was heated. Vapor entered the atmosphere flask. Number 2. The atmosphere contained a mixture of hydrogen gas, methane, ammonia, and water vapor. Number 3. Sparks were discharged to mimic lightning, as we mentioned before. Number 4. A condenser cooled the atmosphere, raining water and any dissolved molecules down into the sea flask. And lastly, number 5. As materials cycled through the apparatus, Miller periodically collected samples for analysis. And the result of Miller's experiment was that Miller identified a variety of organic molecules that are common in organisms. These included simple compounds such as formaldehyde and hydrogen cyanide, and more complex molecules such as amino acids and long chains of carbon and hydrogen, known as hydrocarbons. So the conclusion of this experiment was that organic molecules, a first step in the origin of life, may have been synthesized abiotically on the early Earth. But we'll explore this hypothesis more in detail in Chapter 25. So now it's time for concept check 4.1. Number 1. What conclusion did Stanley Miller draw when he found amino acids in the products of his experiment? Answer. Amino acids are essential molecules for living organisms. Their synthesis from gases of the primitive atmosphere on Earth demonstrated that life's molecules could initially have been synthesized from non-living molecules. Number 2. What if? When Miller tried the experiment in Figure 4.2 without the electrical discharge, no organic compounds were found. What might explain this result? Answer. So, the spark provides energy needed for the inorganic molecules in the atmosphere to react with each other.